You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments. If this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show.
Today, our guest is Katie Hardie. Katie is a board-certified holistic nutritionist and FDN practitioner who helps high performers reclaim their energy, optimize nutrition, and achieve lasting results through bio-individual, science-driven programs. She combines her lived experience as an athlete, corporate professional, and mom with advanced training in nutrition, performance psychology, and functional health. Katie is recognized for creating sustainable, results-driven strategies that empowers clients to thrive at their peak. Today, we are going to talk about how your hidden wellness may actually be affecting your performance in a negative way, even though on the outside, you're looking great and you think you're feeling great. So let's jump in. Katie, I am so excited to have you here today on our episode, and we're going to talk about things that are near and dear to my heart and things that I do with my clients as well. But you have a wonderful story that tells about really your clients and what they work through, which is around leaders that think that they're fooling people or even fooling themselves on how well they're doing in life. As you know, when we think about wellness or how they're showing up as a leader. And I'd love for you to start with that story so our listeners might just resonate with it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got a gal in mind who's really successful at work. She looks great on the outside, very active, mountain bikes, hikes, runs, does all the things that from the outside seems like she's got it all put together. And then when you get to talk to somebody, and what I do in my world is we talk about poops and periods and all the things that aren't really happy hour conversations, but you find out she's got really inconsistent stools, a really hard stomach, like bloat hard, not like rock hard abs hard, doesn't sleep well, just the gut's been bothering her for years, and leg cramps at night. And who would know that? Nobody would know that from the outside, right? And so after, digging into what's going on inside, the hidden stressors that you can't see from the outside, we've spent many months working, and she's now at a spot where she's not relying upon caffeine at all to get going during the day. She's not relying upon the wine at night to wind down from all the caffeine and adrenaline during the day. Her stomach's flat, not bloated. She has amazing poops, and her energy is glowing to the point where people are like, what are you doing? Your skin looks amazing. Are you doing something different? Are you lifting differently? Like, it's coming off physically. And so that's been a really fun situation, and just an example of working smarter, not harder, and not having to pretend that the facade you're putting out there is really what's going on inside.
Yeah, I love that story because we say, okay, I'm going to perform at work. I'm going to do my exercise. I'm going to show up where I need to. I'm going to have high energy. But then when you really look at stuff on the inside, there might be other things going on. And I believe that most people can resonate with this, right? There's the obvious of, okay, I need to find more time to exercise, or I need to de-stress. So I'm just going to have one glass of wine to de-stress. And every now and then that's okay. But when you're finding yourself having to do that more often, what is it doing to the inside of your body? And I think that that's really good for our listeners just to pause and think about it. And you're right. You talk about, let's just say it, poop and periods, like you talk about, but it's real. It's what tells us what's happening on the inside. And so the barista stool chart is, I'm sure, what you go by and have people look at. But that is a great thing for people to pull up and say, where am I with what's going on? But I'd love to talk about what are some of the things that you did to help this person first realize, because we don't want to believe it when this is happening, right? Like, we know something's off, but we feel like we're checking the boxes and everything. So what are some things that help your clients realize, yeah, there is something more here that I need to really consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it actually starts when people are leaving the doctor in these types of situations. People are told, oh, everything looks great. Your labs are all normal. You look fine. And then when they don't feel fine, they're kind of like, well, I don't know that I feel fine. And they're like, no, you're fine. So it kind of discounts what they're actually experiencing. So, and I grew up very conventional, Western oriented. So that's the world I knew. And that was right. And I'm not saying it's not right now. I'm saying there's also another perspective that isn't focused solely on disease and disease management, that's more focused on optimal feeling, optimal performance. And so that's where you can go inside. You can look at some of the same blood, labs, just with different ranges. You can also get into poop samples or stool samples and see what's going on with the microbiome and how well you're digesting your food. You can do urine and saliva tests in conjunction with blood to get into stress hormones and sex hormones. And so many people, especially now, are very familiar with sex hormones and, hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And many people don't understand that's downstream of the stress hormones, and those get neglected with the blood only. And you can get into, so many more specific, lab tests if people are so inclined. And then you can also get into biofeedback. And I really like that. So biofeedback examples would be a continuous glucose monitor to tell you real time how your body's responding to not just food and drinks, but stressors. And that's something people don't realize, that their daily routine can be contributing to high blood sugar, not just the pastries or the wine or the beers or the food that they're eating. And then biofeedback in terms of nervous system regulation. And I think in our fast-paced culture where it's all about achieving and checking the boxes, the nervous system really gets discounted or skipped over because it's not really glamorous as far as, hey, I sat down and did some breath work today, or you want to post a picture of me reading my book. Like, that's not high-paced engagement type of photos, or really videos for that matter. And it's so important for the whole rest of the system to actually work right.
Yeah, I love so many things you said in there. So I want to start with the stress levels and the stress hormones that you talk about. I'd love you to dig a little deeper into that, because I believe a lot of our listeners are senior leaders, which is high stress situation. And so talk about the stress hormones a little bit, and maybe some things to look at and think about for people to understand better.
Yeah, so there's something called a diurnal pattern, what is expected to be of our stress, or like cortisol, like hormone production. And what we want to be able to survive the upcoming stressors that could come our way during the day is called a high or strong cortisol awakening response, or CAR, if you've heard the abbreviation. And what that means is, as soon as you wake up in the morning, your cortisol should actually spike. So cortisol is not necessarily a bad thing, because we need that for survival. And we hear cortisol is bad, cortisol is bad. Cortisol activated chronically and or too high is what's bad, not the cortisol itself. And so what we want is a big spike and then a drop. So it's like an inverted V, and then it should continue to drop throughout the day, as our melatonin, which is what helps us get ready to fall asleep, rest, recover, that should be inversely rising as the cortisol is dropping. So we have a couple things that could be going on. One's just the pattern in general. So back to the high pace, push, push, push. You could do that for years, decades, in your 20s, 30s, just grinding it, cranking it, and you actually feel awesome when you're doing that, because what's happened with a stress response is your body is releasing sugar into the bloodstream. So you can run or fight that tiger or whatever's chasing you. And now, our modern day, it isn't that physical threat. It's the mental, emotional, psychological stressors that aren't just lasting seconds or minutes. Like when you have a predator coming after you, it's done pretty fast, and then everything comes back to normal. But now it's a constant barrage of emails, meetings, taking kids places, taking care of parents, trying to take care of your own stuff. And so it's chronically activating the cortisol. And what that does is it creates that excess sugar running through the bloodstream, which is actually damaging to our blood vessels. And this is what contributes to the chronic diseases, the metabolic diseases you've heard, like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, excess weight around the waist. Just all those conditions are a reflection of that chronically activated stress response. So what happens, yes, we handle it, and it could be the right curve, like that spike and drop, just at a higher level than what our optimal or ideal ranges are. And after decades of that, at some point in underneath the surface, like you don't see this, but there's dysfunction starting to happen as that's going on. And our bodies are great at compensating. So what we do is we turn off our sex hormone production because we need to take care of today's cortisol production, or even more adrenaline, which sucks more of the reserves out of tomorrow's. Or we might just pause the digestive enzyme production because, if we're not actually around tomorrow, it doesn't much matter if we can digest the meal because it's a moot point. Or we'll slow that thyroid down. And that thyroid is kind of that basal metabolic rate. And so many women have low thyroid levels. And again, we have conventional levels that tend to just look at the thyroid stimulating hormone, and then functional would be tighter in looking at the active T3, the active thyroid hormone, or the stored, the T4 that gets converted. And so these are quote unquote long-term projects that get put on pause to take care of pumping out that cortisol to get through today.
Yeah, really good points and things for people to consider, because we talk about that things are so stressful all the time and we're in fight or flight mode all the time. But now I'm hoping that you guys that are listening are understanding that yes, you can handle stress for a while and you're like, I'm doing good. And sometimes people wear it with a badge of honor, but the reality is you're really destroying things on the inside. So I love that you gave the detail for people to understand that. And I want to comment what you said earlier about Western medicine and holistic medicine, which is sometimes considered Eastern medicine. And I believe it's a blend of the two, right? There's not you're not going to do this or you don't do that. And it sounds like you align with that, with what you're saying too. And it's really finding that balance, because there are times you have to go to the traditional doctor. You might need to do certain things, but knowing that what is it doing for you and is it actually helping you move forward with your entire wellness is really important. So just want to pause for any comments you want to say about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a really great system for emergency care and sick management. And there are really great aspects to that. And the focus is also not on optimal function or prevention. So that's partly due to the insurance companies and the restrictions the physicians are working within. So it's more of a system thing than, everybody's wanting to help. So that's kind of what they're confined in. And so they can complement each other really well, because ideally, if we're trying to look for optimal performance, we need our health to be optimal for that to happen. And when we're in those optimal places, it squeezes you out of getting to that point of dysfunction where then you need to go there or, have, the surgery. Now, injury surgeries are different. I'm not talking about that, but that's where I want to go. Like when I tore my ACL, I'm glad we had that. When I had an emergency C-section, that's what I want, and the goal is to not need to use it for the chronic health issues that have been accumulating over decades.
Yeah. Love that. Nicely laid out for people to understand that, there's a benefit to both, and which sides do you use when, it meets the best thing for you and your entire wellness. Yeah. So glad you brought that up. Now, you did talk about another thing, which is around the nervous system and things you can do. And, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because before I got into the health and wellness field and helping many clients, including myself, right? I thought of, okay, I need to meditate. And I was like, meditation does not work for me. It's just not who I am. And that's okay, because I found other things that help me regulate my nervous system. And so I'd love for you to talk about just the different things that maybe people can do and why it's so important to be able to do that maybe you didn't already say earlier.
So I think a lot of people, particularly women, tend to use sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, activating activities as their quote unquote recovery from their sympathetic activity day. So an example would be going out for a run to decompress, right? You can enjoy it. It doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. It's activating your fight or flight nervous system. Obviously, you're running. You're literally fighting or fleeing in that situation. And so this is something I've learned all these things because I've done them all wrong or have been guilty as charged. And I used to think, oh, it's just like an easy 10-mile run, and not realizing. And again, you can handle this in your 20s and maybe your 30s. And then eventually that under the, the lower part of the iceberg under the water is like getting bigger before it starts, to surface. And so that is actually, you're trying to combat stress with more stress, or having the wine, and that's inflammatory. And I'm not saying, like you said, that can very much be part of like a healthy, balanced lifestyle. It's when it's the reward at the end of the day, and that is the only coping mechanism. And then it cycles into the next morning, like the client I was starting off with, who then needed the caffeine to get going, which is also, what is that doing to your cortisol? It's spiking it. It's a fight or flight state. So much of our, our seemingly dealing with stress is actually layering on more stress. So on the flip side, the nervous system piece, I like to look at it in terms of like kind of sprints. Like people I think are familiar with high intensity interval training or sprints. So you're pushing the top end high. What our culture tends to forget is to drop the low end low in order to push the high end higher. So, with nervous system, like we talked about, the sympathetic side activating, parasympathetic or rest and digest is so important for allowing that performance to happen. So I have a strength and conditioning background as well. And when you're in the gym, it's like periodization, where you're purposely planning a stressor with a recovery. And then when you go do the thing again, whether it's strength, power, speed, you can push it a little bit more because your body's adapted. In order to adapt, you need that recovery. You don't actually grow when you're in the gym, pounding the pavement, lifting the weights. You're actually tearing down your muscle fibers. That's a stress. Like anything, when we want to experience growth, there's going to be something uncomfortable. And then it has to have the right recovery, because if you just, max out your squats, each day you're actually getting progressively worse or weaker. And that's like with life. If you continually just stress it without those little recoveries, your body loses resilience. You don't have the strength. And so with nervous system work, usually with high achievers, go-getters, that's the hardest part. People are fine getting out for the run, going to the gym, like checking the boxes. It's the pulling it back, because people have put so much worth into our productivity. How many boxes did we check? The badge of honors you were talking about, what is it going to look like? Am I being selfish by taking time to actually sit down and chew my food? So it's so important, and it's reframing that is actually the piece that is what we should build the rest of our day around, are those little strategic recoveries, because that's really going to optimize that output on the backside.
I have to admit, when I was leading teams, I used to wear with the badge of honor, I used to say, give me the worst news that you have right before my workout, because then I have a really good workout, because, I was angry or stressed out or upset. And I felt better. I thought I felt better, but actually I was just bringing that stressor in. And so
you did feel better.
Say, okay, now I need to not say that anymore. Yeah.
Well, you probably did feel better, because adrenaline and cortisol feel awesome, and they're addictive.
Yeah. Which is, and you're right, there's a portion in our life that it's good for us. Unfortunately, we have a culture now that it is all the time, and that's what's not good for us. So I love that you bring that up, because some people are like, get rid of it. No, you actually do need some of it at certain times of the day. So I'm so glad that you said that. But it's important. So now it's like, what are the other things that you can incorporate? And I love that you said just sit down to eat. So many people stand up and eat and don't realize your body actually does not absorb the nutrients as well when you are in sympathetic mode, which is partly standing.
100%, because what are you? You're like in that predator mode. You're on your feet, ready to go do something, right? So what we need is to be in parasympathetic, that rest and digest mode, because that's what allows our body to feel safe and say, hey, I can actually put energy toward producing and releasing those digestive enzymes, because there's a couple pieces here. If we're eating all the quote unquote perfect food for our body, and we don't have the digestive power to absorb it at the cellular level, you're passing it right through. It's a waste of the nutrients. And if we're not chewing it, because we're so busy, like we're not present with where we're at, we're looking at our computer doing work, we're staring at some screen, just like totally disengaged, you're likely not chewing enough, which is the first stage of digestion. So in order for the nutrients from this food that you're putting into your body, in order for those to be assimilated at the cellular or tissue level, you have to chew it and get it really small. And then your acid, your hydrochloric acid and your digestive enzymes in your stomach need to break it down further to get it to a one cellular size to go through the cell membrane. And most of us are like chomp, chomp, swallow. Weird. I have all this bloat after I eat. It's like, and then I'm hungry like at 2 hours later and I'm craving something sweet. That's because we're not getting the amino acids from the food that we're like, sitting down, if we're even sitting down to eat at all.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So true. There's so many things for us to learn. We think we understand and we were taught certain things, but really when you start learning about what does the body do at the cellular level, there's so much opportunity that are micro steps. Like you said, there's sprints that you can do that can help you absorb those nutrients and reduce inflammation and help yourself with that. So I appreciate all these little tidbits that you're telling people on what that they do. So I think it's really good and important.
Yeah, and I think high achievers are so
I think about,
I think high achievers are so used to being hyper productive that it's like, all right, I'm gonna check this box, check it. And you could get yourself in a sticky situation there because you're so busy, sympathetic nervous system checking boxes that you're not being in the right state that you need to be for those boxes that you're trying to check, especially in the nervous system category or like fueling category, for this to actually work. So it is what you eat and what you're checking the box on. It is also how you do it, like how you are when you're doing that. And I think that's so, it can be really like intangible for people to get, because it might get a little bit more on that energetic side of the spectrum or the Eastern side. And it's what's actually activating which side of the nervous system. You can't sympathetic's the gas, parasympathetic's the brakes. You can't be stomping on both at the same time. It's one or the other. And so if you're on your feet, sympathetic, it's the gas. If you're just checking boxes and like not really present, it's, hitting the gas. And so for those things to keep us in balance, we have to learn how to hit the brakes. And that is so hard for people. And with that gal I was talking about, we started pulling back a lot of those sympathetic activities that, they just start piling on. You're not really consciously aware. And so we're affecting the hormones. And so it's like you're doing less of like the busyness and fueling more in dropping body fat, dropping inflammation, improving sleep, improving health, improving outcome.
Now, when I think about nutrition and health and people taking care of their wellness, taking care of themselves, what do you believe is one uncomfortable truth that leaders need to hear right now about that?
I think one uncomfortable truth is performance follows health. So the other way of saying it is health precedes performance. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, once I get all my to-dos done, I will take care of my health when I have time. And unfortunately, in the short term, you can do that and it sneaks up. And you might not notice it physically, but mentally, you're not going to be as sharp, on point, focused, just emotional regulation. All that, when you have an inflamed inside, is not going to be on point. It's not going to be your optimal performance.
Yeah, I love that. I think most of my clients that I work with are like, yeah, I'm going to get to that after I do this project, or yeah, I'm going to get to that at the end of the day. And then, the end of the day ends up being 11 at night. And so they don't get to it. And it's a pattern. And then we realize, okay, you can't perform the way you want to perform. You think you are. You think you are because you're physically there, you're handling the actions. But the reality is, you can actually be so much better if you just took that pause and took care of yourself first. So, really appreciate you mentioning that. I think it's so important. Now, I know we're getting close on time, but you do have a great thing that you talk about with N of one. And I would just like you to mention what that means to get our listeners thinking about maybe how they can look at some certain things.
Sure. So this kind of relates to the Western and Eastern approaches. And to help make things more efficient, we've kind of the Western side have gone to these mass studies where N is the number of people or participants in the study. And so we've gone toward randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies being the gold standard. And the flip side is the Eastern perspective is individualized care or medicine. And so where I think I first really got slammed in the face with this was, once you're, in that third trimester of pregnancy, it's a 99% chance of everything going fine. And it was about a month before my scheduled C-section, because I'd had an emergency one time prior, so had to be scheduled. I just didn't feel good after dinner, wasn't feeling the kicks. So long story, I went in, they're like, oh, we're going to find it. And I was like, I just knew that we weren't. And even though 99% of people, that's going to be fine, they're feeling all over. And they're like, where do you normally feel the heartbeat? I'm like, my butt, like I'm small, like it doesn't matter. Like I just knew where this was going. And they're like, we're going to leave. And then the doctor and two other people come in and they're like, sorry, there's no heartbeat. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, this sucks, like I was like, I don't want to do a natural delivery because I've not done that before. The other one was a C-section. I don't know if I got it in me to push when there's no prize. Don't really want another C-section, and have to recover from that. I'm like, is there a third option? And then right after that, pop, I was like, oh, I started blacking out. Turns out my uterus ruptured, so I was running in for emergency C-section, and I was just out, so I wasn't awake. So I got my third option. I didn't have to be awake for that, but regardless, I woke up, and now I'm in that less than 1% category. You're like, well, now what do we do? I followed all the rules, I'm not saying following them was what caused anything, but it didn't guarantee anything. And that was what took me to kind of be at that spot where you kind of, A, question a lot of things, B, you're just kind of if it can't hurt, why not try it, And that's when I got introduced to Eastern medicine. And I, grew up following the USDA food pyramid, lots of carbs, not really into much for veggies, saturated fat's bad. And then I was like, I don't know, I guess if beets or if there's some sort of food that can help me recover, I'll do it. I don't like beets, but if you tell me that's going to help, I'll eat it. And that's when I dove into holistic nutrition and explored Eastern medicine. It was the first time, because I always consider that woo-woo. And it was the first time I was like, wow, I feel light. I feel optimistic. There's something else out here. And that's where I realized all right, just because it works for 99% of the other people, that's great for them. I need to know what works for me. And that's the N of one, where regardless of anybody else, how it impacts you is at the end of the day what matters. And so how I like to look at things is, yes, just because they say you shouldn't feel that doesn't mean you aren't feeling that. I hear this all the time from people. They go in and they're like, well, everything's great. They're like, I don't feel great. And they're like, but what I don't understand. They're like, well, we don't understand either. You're fine. And it kind of discounts their experience. And I think we all are unique and we all have unique plans unique plans because of our unique, beings as we come here, our unique schedules, our unique circumstances. And that's why I don't think there's one mass plan that works for everybody. And it's really important to find the individualized program for you, because that's what's working smarter, not just harder, to see and actualize the results that you're wanting to at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. It sounds like it helped you find something better for you and now probably for your family, that you have. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's so important for people to think about that. We are complex human beings, and we need to find what is best for us. And what works for one person doesn't always work for another person. And I can tell you that, me now in my 50s, and now doing, holistic wellness, and I have my own 10 steps that I follow, I feel better than I have felt. Like, I can't remember ever feeling this good. Like, seriously. I mean, people are like, whatever, Stacy. No, seriously. Like, I don't feel the bloat. I feel lighter. I feel happier and healthier. And it takes work, but you can do it by step, right? You don't have to do it all at once.
Well, I 100% agree with that. And I know you're not blowing smoke up people's butts, because when you're acknowledging what your body needs, and that's what I had to sit with after that experience, because it was another emergency C-section. I couldn't work out. Back to I'm just going to chill out with a 10-mile run. Couldn't do that. So you're forced to sit with it and actually address it. And I think that's why so many of us go to more sympathetic activities, because it's distracting. You're avoiding the actual thing that you need to do or that's in front of you, because you get the dopamine hit from it too, right? You feel good. And so when you start acknowledging your body's needs and your adrenals and the fact that we do need to recover, it doesn't mean lay around all day. It's just kind of like a series of sprints during the day versus a long marathon after marathon after marathon. The power output or the productive output is so much greater when you can take those short reprieves, and they can be a minute. It could just be like walking away from your desk or your project, just to get circulation, blood flow, and oxygen and nutrients throughout your body. And it doesn't mean you're being lazy. You're actually being smarter, with it.
So many good points. I could talk to you all day long. I love talking about this topic, and I think we can help so many people. So I hope that our listeners just take one of these things that we're talking about. But there's that sound, and we do need to ask the fun questions now. So are you ready for those fun questions?
Bring it.
All right. The first one is, are you someone who talks things out or thinks them through internally first?
I like to talk them out.
That can be very powerful to be able to talk things out. So love that. All right. Do you naturally wake up early or stay up late?
Early.
Yeah. I'm an early bird too. I feel like I miss the day. Like, what's your favorite thing to do in the morning when you wake up?
Well, I like to be up for an hour before other people are up, just to have like my space. So I kind of have my morning routine where I don't know if you mentioned Eastern medicine, if you're familiar with Qigong. It's kind of like a moving meditation just for like 5-10 minutes. It's not long. And then make whatever my warm drink of the day is and get everybody's stuff ready for breakfast and lunch. And then we're off.
I love it. Well, Katie, thank you so much. You brought some great ideas, I think, to our listeners. I know I'm even, walking away with some ideas for myself. And so really appreciate you being on our show today.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time.
This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.